My name is David.
And my name is Jason.
And this is Discern Realities, a Dungeon World podcast. Our first segment is What Happened Here Recently?
Okay, so before we get going, David, I wanted to point out that this is episode 30 of Discern Realities, and if you recall, we set a goal when we first started the show to have 30 episodes complete by the end of 2016, and we are several months ahead of schedule.
Yeah, so, that was my New Year's resolution.
Yeah. So congratulations to you, to us, I suppose, to the podcast, and since we hit our little milestone a little early, I'm pretty excited about that. When we started the show, I didn't have. And I knew it was going to be good, and I knew we would stick with it because that's what we do in the Gauntlet. We stick with things. But I'm still pleasantly surprised. I'm still surprised that we're doing this, that we're having a good time with it. And I'm really, really happy about the listener response to Discern Realities. So listeners, thanks so much for being great fans of the show.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I had no idea that we'd have as many listeners as we have and as active an audience as we have. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's been super, super cool. So now to our segment. Listeners, you may remember from the very, very first episode of Discern Realities, I framed this show as sort of an analog or an equivalent to the old Dragon magazine. And Dragon magazine mostly covered Dungeons and Dragons, but occasionally it covered other games that it thought would be of interest to its readers, other role-playing games. And so let's do that, David. Let's talk about a game that's not Dungeon World. I think that'd be fun. We've done it a couple times here and there, but I gather you had something you wanted to say about Monster of the Week, another Powered by the Apocalypse game.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk about Monster of the Week because its rules are real similar to Dungeon World. So if you know how to play Dungeon World, you practically already know how to play 90% of Monster of the Week.
The transition is super easy. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is kind of like your, it's a Monster of the Week thing. It's like Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It's like Supernatural. It's that kind of story. If you like those kinds of shows, you might like playing that kind of game. I wanted to talk about a character of mine that ran through several campaigns. He was kind of like he was like a kid coming out of high school, or maybe still in high school, but he's like a dropout, he's kind of a good for nothing, but he's getting mixed up with these monster hunters, because this terrible thing happened to him when he was younger, and that got him kind of in the life. If you're a fan of Supernatural, you know what I mean by that. His kind of big thing was his beat up car.
Was it like a Trans Am or something?
Yeah, it was a beat-up Trans Am, because I always wanted to have a Trans Am from the 70s. I thought it'd be so cool. So my character had one.
Wish fulfillment. That's what role-playing games are good for, right?
Hey, in my mind, it happened.
Right.
No, but, I mean, we've had so much fun with that. Like, he's like, had to repair it and dropped an engine block on a demon. Like a vampire,
right.
Like burst into flame in the back of the car and destroyed the upholstery. It's been lived in, and it was great. We kind of did Jason's signature. What do you call it?
Oh, I have a whole series of Monster of the Week mysteries that are basically just repurposed or repackaged stories from 1980s action horror films. So
yeah, like the B list.
yeah, like the bottom of the barrel. Well, a couple of not so bottom of the barrel, but yeah, that's kind of like my thing. I like the sort of like 80s action horror tropes, and so my mysteries, for example, I've had mysteries inspired by the movie Phantasm. I just ran that one, actually. I've had mysteries inspired by there's this really terrible B horror movie called The Stuff about this ice cream that kills you, and so our monster was this like ice cream that was actually like an alien organism, right? Called The Dream. It was super fun. Monster of the Week is probably the game I run the second most, like after Dungeon World. Like I run Dungeon World the most. I just love it because, like you said, the transition from Dungeon World to Monster of the Week is pretty straightforward. It's not difficult. It's still like a combination of kind of, well, in Dungeon World's case, it's exploration and action. But in Monster of the Week's case, it's like investigation and action. Like it's a pretty easy transition, you know, it's party-based, it's team-based. Intra-party dynamics, yes, but intra-party conflict, no. And so it has the feel of Dungeon World in a lot of ways. It's a great, fun, action-oriented with like touches of horror and mystery sort of game.
Yeah, and it's great. And then I think the last time that I played with you, the last time that we saw my character, he was in this seemingly innocuous flower shop, but something was going a little strange there. And at the end of the session, this vine had like wrapped him up and was like pulling him in. And that's the last time that we ever saw that guy.
Yeah. We never saw him again. It's a good game. Hey, before we leave this, we should mention that our sister podcast, Plus One Forward, their most recent episode, Rich had the designer of Monster of the Week on. So listeners, if you want to know more about Monster of the Week, you should go check that out.
Yeah, so if you hop over onto his podcast, you'll hear the designer talk about his first time playing a game, and then the game itself, and then you'll hear some actual play, so if you want to hear how it kind of goes. But yeah, that's all I really wanted to say about it.
Cool, awesome. Yeah, no, it's a good little good little remembrance. Yeah, it's fun. And we do play games in the Gauntlet other than Dungeon World, so.
All right, let's move on to our next segment. Our next segment is What Should I Be on the Lookout For?
Okay, so recently, one of our listeners, Will, he posted in our G Plus community about this free resource that was made available called the Menagerie of Minor Magic.
Yeah, I saw that.
Pretty fantastic alliterative name, right? The Menagerie of Minor Magic. It's by Arnold Kemp. I think the game company is called DWD Studios. Anyway, it's completely free. It is a list of 100 minor magic items. They're mostly system neutral, very easily converted to Dungeon World. Many of them are just flavor text, really, with like effects that, you know, which is basically what, you know, a lot of Dungeon World magic items are. Very few in the collection like have like, you know, D&D stats or whatever. So I really like it. It's pretty cool. It's particularly helpful because sometimes the treasure tables, you know, in the Dungeon World book, like has you need a minor magic item, right? like it specifically comes up a minor magic item. And I have a little personal collection that I've been, you know, kind of like amassing in my notes over the years. But this is a pretty cool little supplement. I like it a lot.
Yeah, I love things like this just because I always have a hard time like coming up with loot on the fly, and I don't want my loot to be boring. So if it has a little bit of magical effect, I'm in for that.
Yeah, so here's a good one. The Color Thief's Brush. This paintbrush has a needle on the back. If you prick something, you steal all the color from it, but can later paint with those same brilliant colors, stored in the brush, controlled by imagination. If a book is pricked, it will steal the words. The book can then be reconstructed, but it takes a few days to reproduce. I love that.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I like that. Sounds like that could be useful.
I like this one. The Saint's Bones. About the size of a cigar box, contains a mandible and some carpals. Will rattle ominously when a lie is uttered within 5 paces. Just little things like that. It's filled with stuff like that. It's completely free. We'll have a link in the show notes for listeners.
Awesome. Let's move on to our next segment. Our next segment is What Here Is Not What It Appears to Be.
Okay, so I'm probably going to get in trouble for this segment. I have very, very strong feelings about the Bard playbook, and
I know, I saw it back on here, and I was like, really? What do you want to say about it?
I have very strong feelings about the Bard playbook. I wanted to talk about the Arcane Art move, which is kind of the main move that the Bard does, right? Our last episode, we did the Ranger Animal Companion, you know, sort of deep dive, and that went over really well. People really like that. So I thought we'd do something similar with the Bard's Arcane Art move. Here's my problem with the Bard as a general matter, okay? It's this move. Because this move is definitely meant to be the sort of move where in the middle of a fight, you pull out your guitar and shoot magic from it, right? I mean, that's basically what it is, right? Like, I mean, it's very like Final Fantasy, you know, JRPG. I don't like that. I just don't like it. I just think it's so dumb. I think it's just because like I come from Dungeons and Dragons 2e, that's where I got my start. And, the bards in that one game, they can cast magic, but it's more like wizard magic. But their musical talent, their songwriting and all that stuff, that's like a separate thing. Like they're really more of like a jack of all trades sort of character rather than this like magic shooting, guitar wizard or whatever, and just from a straight read of the Arcane Art move, it's pretty obvious that's how it was written. Like, it was written to be this, like, I fire off magic in the middle of a fight using my guitar or my lute or whatever, right? My pipes. Because there's the Metal Hurlant advance move, which is basically like, lets you shoot, damaging magic from your guitar. Also, the fact that magic can rebound to other targets. This is how this bard is supposed to look on screen. How do you feel about it? Am I just being, like, rigid here, like, or is this as stupid as I think it is?
So I'm not in love with the idea of a dude's playing or using a flute or whatever, and like somehow that instantly like shoots a magic missile. That just kind of breaks tone to me.
Yeah, I mean, this is the curse of my play style. I play so, a 16:9 rectangular theater screen in my head, right? Like where I'm watching all the action happen like in the movie version of our game, right? And it just always looks so dumb to me whenever the player's like, one player's like, I grab my sword and I rush into the battle. Another player's like, I'm going to, shoot my crossbow or whatever. I'm going to fire an arrow. And then the bard's like, I take out my guitar and I start playing I take out my guitar and I just start jamming away. And it just, God, it just looks so stupid on screen.
Yeah.
I just think it's so dumb.
I can't, for me, it's almost like a holdover from like video games. Like,
well, that's what I said. Yeah, it's like a Final Fantasy thing, right?
Yeah, where you want that like, and even more like mass multiplayer video games where you want that support character who's going to jam out on their guitar and somehow that's boosting your players. But that's not a good storytelling element unless you have someone who's real creative. But I don't know.
Yeah, I know a lot of people who are listening to this are going to disagree with me, and that's fine. When players pick the bard, I totally let them be the bard that shoots magic from the guitar. It's fine. It's just, I find it a little bothersome. Anyway, let's make this a more productive conversation rather than just me bitching, okay?
Yeah, something constructive.
So here's what I'm thinking. So I think the Arcane Art move, to me, it looks better on screen when it's something that's done during downtime or make camp, right? Now, obviously, the advanced move Metal Hurlant, that doesn't make any sense. Or even the rebounding to other targets, that doesn't make a lot of sense in this context. But I think the best time to use it, though, is like during downtime or make camp, because it's kind of like, okay, we're listening to the bard play, and his magic song is kind of buffing us or whatever, right? Or we're being inspired or that kind of thing, right? The way the cleric might tend to your wounds, at camp. Like, it's kind of the same thing with the bard, like, playing a song that heals you, his magic song. Just because you're doing it during, like, downtime, it doesn't mean that, like, you have to minimize the on-screen magic, right? To me, it's just, like, an opportunity to show, like, a different way that magic works. Because, when you have the bard just, like, firing off magic in the middle of a fight, that's just, like, the wizard doing it, right? Like, it doesn't seem special to me.
I could agree. That's gonna, like, really... This is more my beef with the bard playbook. Like, you play it like that and it just kind of minimizes the effect of like, why would I ever play this character?
Yeah. Well, and I know that in fact there are like reskinned bard playbooks in the world, and I think those are probably worth like exploring and seeing if those are good replacements for the standard bard playbook to get this more this different effect. Let's make the assumption that like you can still use Arcane Art in the middle of a fight, and that's which is its intended use. Encourage players to use it during downtime also, right? Because you can do some cool things. So I one time had a bard player. He was gonna, he was playing his song in an attempt to heal the other characters, right? And he did such a good job, like painting this really, really beautiful picture of what was happening on screen. He was playing he had a lute, I think, or a lyre, maybe. He's playing the lyre, and as he's playing it, like he's describing like these little sort of miasmic fairies, like kind of coming out, kind of like working their way out of the instrument, and these fairies are like flitting to each character and like gently, tending and sewing up their wounds. It was the way he described it, it was just so lovely and beautiful. And I liked that so much better. It just felt more special. So I think as a GM, you should encourage your players to really, really encourage your bard players to really think about their songs and what the magic looks like on screen. And I think when you're doing the Arcane Art during downtime, you get more opportunities to paint those really vivid pictures.
Yeah, I think it could be really neat if the way that you describe your bard is not like, this isn't just him playing music, like this is something arcane that he knows, but it can only be accomplished with an instrument.
Yeah.
Like, if you're painting it more like that, and then, like, you're seeing, like, the environment of the world changing because of, like, he's essentially casting a spell, but it's like, he's aware of it. He's not just like, fee diddly dee on his guitar, and that blasts a missile out of the, like, neck of the guitar. Like, I don't want
right,
that.
Yeah.
But if you, like, describe him, like, somehow, like, casting the spell by having to interact with this magical object in this way, and that changes the environment, like, to the adverse effect of your enemies, I'm more on board for that. I could see that more in a movie happening. And then everyone might look at him and he kind of winks, like...
That's good. Yeah,
I could see
I'm into that. I'm into that. Yeah. I have some ideas for other ways that you can kind of encourage, making this move a little more interesting, no matter how you use it, whether you use it sort of as written, like, in the middle of combat or in the middle of a really tense situation, or whether you kind of use it more in this sort of downtime way that I like to do it. You should always ask the bard player to name the song. It's a big ask, like, but I think the bard players I've had who really get into the tale-telling, song-singing, legend-making aspects of bards, they really love this, and they really get into it, right? They get into, like, naming the songs and describing what the songs are about and that kind of thing. I think that's just table stakes for the bard, personally. Thoughts?
I agree. I think if you're going to, like, know all these things about monsters and things like that, like this is more like you're in the know, like almost like a wizard's in the know, but you're hiding under this veneer of being a bard. Like, tell me how your bard is somehow more than just a guy who goes from tavern to tavern singing. Like, what's deeper about him that he's able to make these and know these things that, like, normal folks just don't have business knowing.
Yeah. That's good. That's a good insight. That's true. Another thing I like to do is have the other players describe their character's reactions to the song, apart from just getting healed or getting a +1 forward or whatever, right?
Right.
I think it's a really good opportunity for other players to, like, let us know a little bit about their character's background, or, like, what they know about the songs, how the lyrics affect them. Like, maybe there's a little bit of, like, history or mystery there to explore, and which is, again, it kind of goes back to why I sort of like to do the move in more of a downtime situation, so we can kind of have those interesting dynamics. We have time to do those things. And also, I think you should keep a running list of the various songs. And as the GM, it's just another tool you can use to, like, sort of do callbacks and to, kind of reincorporate some of this, reincorporate these songs back into the world, reincorporate the stories and the legends. I think that's really high level GMing, but I think it's worth trying.
Absolutely. Yeah. Anytime, you have those callbacks, like, you just look like a genius, even though, like, all you did was write something down that they said.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you should be doing that all the time as a GM anyway. But, like, I think particularly with the bard songs, like, to me, it just enriches the whole experience.
Yeah. Now that I'm thinking about it, like, I kind of just want to, like, try this out to see if I can make it work, and if I could make it feel good on screen. I don't know. I haven't really given it a good effort.
Yeah. Okay. So, all right. Well, so if you do want to try to, like, try this, sort of like deep bard or whatever, try this little variation, a little fast hack. I did this once a long time ago, and it was pretty cool, and it actually inspired my compendium class, the Storysmith, which we talked about a long time ago in another episode. But this is a little fast hack you can do on the Arcane Art move, which is on a 12+. Okay, if they roll Arcane Art and they get a 12+, they get an additional magical benefit associated with the specific story or song that they're performing, okay? And again, you have this, like, running list of songs and the effects, kind of like the druid animal transformations,
Yeah.
That encourages the players to think about the specific songs and the stories behind those songs, and it really just sort of encourages that sort of, like, more, that deeper, more enriching, external fiction-y sort of play with the bard. So I know that's just something that's a little thing worth considering.
Yeah, that's really great. I like that. All right, let's move on to the next segment. Our next segment is, what here is useful or valuable to me?
Okay, so we are continuing our contest Codex Keeper contest. When this episode goes up, there will only be a day or two left in the contest. Yeah, so we have a submission that we're going to read here. Do you want to go ahead and take it away, David?
Yeah, so this is from listener Jim Morrison, and this is the Goddess of Blood and Cruel Fate. When vengeance pulses in your veins, travel west on the night of the blood moon until you reach the miserable stump of the Tree of Eternal Perfection. There, drink of blood drawn from your enemy or from a suitable proxy, eat an unhealthy portion of the wild red-rooted wormwood, and go to sleep beside the stump, all while clutching a drawn blade. Then you roll plus bonds. On a hit, you dream a vision of the Goddess of Blood and Cruel Fate, who weaves the destinies of men in crimson. On a 10+, the goddess asks you when and where you will meet your enemy. The words you will speak will come true, though it will appear to be the doing of mortal hands. When you wake, you expel the blood, drunk as a black mass.
Ew.
Gross. On a 7 and 9, the goddess asks what advantage will attain when you next meet your enemy. Impress her in your answer with cleverness or flattery, for the goddess is fickle and may give the advantage you name to your enemy instead. When you wake, you expel the blood drunk, and much more as liquid. Gross.
This is gross. This move is so gross.
And then on a 6-, you suffer terrible seizures. The MC makes a hard move, or the GM makes a hard move. Yeah.
It's pretty gross. I like it. It's interesting. I like it because it basically took like everything like in that image and he wove like a picture, right? He wove a story behind it. Yeah, it's really interesting. The effect is a bit minor considering how gruesome it is, but I'm into it. But thoughts?
I really want to know like what characters are going to go and do this thing so they can figure out like how to best their enemy. Like they must be kind of from a sick culture.
Maybe, or they just really want vengeance. Like
or they just really need
that's the trigger.
It. Yeah.
They have to be like, what is the trigger? The trigger is when vengeance pulses in your veins. Ooh, that's a good touch when it pulses in your veins. Blood. Yeah, it's cool. When it says roll plus bonds, I assume he means like bonds that you might have with the enemy, right? Is that how you read that? Is that how you understood it?
I wasn't really sure what he meant with the bonds because you usually don't have bonds with non-NPC or non-player characters.
I think you can though.
Can you?
We don't use bonds, so we don't get to explore it very much in our games. But yeah, I think you actually can have bonds with NPCs, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I could see that being a thing. Or I could just see you rolling plus con because it seems like this thing's tearing up your insides.
Right, yeah. Yeah, I think con might be a good roll, you're right. Anyway, it's cool. Yeah, I really like it. I think he's done a really neat thing here and like sort of like painting this really vivid, gross picture of...
yeah, I mean, I'm guessing that the Codex Keeper just vomited up all that blood because she's about to go get her vengeance.
Right, yeah, or something, yeah. Or maybe she's the goddess. I don't know.
Oh, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway, pretty cool, Jim. Thank you for submitting that. It was fun. He managed to make something that was somehow even grosser than the image itself. So bravo.
Well done. Well done. I love it. Let's go ahead and move on to our next segment. Our next segment is What is About to Happen.
Okay, so this is our ongoing comic strip AP featuring the adventures of Ramshackle Crow. Now, Ramshackle, when we last saw you, you were escaping the lands beyond the Black Gate of Death, and you have now been in the city of Dis for 100 years. You are a planar freebooter. In other words, you just you explore other planes, try to find treasures, maybe you do jobs for people, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So let me tell you a little bit about the city of Dis. The city of Dis is... Nexus City isn't quite the right word, but basically it's a city that exists sort of in the center. The center is the best way of understanding it in our, sort of our measly human understanding. It exists kind of like between all these planes, and it occasionally... The city stretches and reaches out into these other planes and breaks into them. And that's how you and your companion, who we'll discuss in a minute, that's how you escape the lands beyond the Black Gate of Death, right? Because the city of Dis sort of intruded into it and you were able to, escape into it, right? The city occasionally swallows up whole planes of existence. So, there are districts and parishes within the city that are like made of, fire and ice and strange elements because Dis has like reached into these little subplanes and sort of absorbed them. That's what Dis is all about. It's very cosmopolitan. Beings from all sorts of cultures and all sorts of planes of existence come there, are there. Sometimes they don't have any choice but to be there because Dis has subsumed their plane of existence. They're there making their lives. Many of them do what you do, which is kind of try to explore these other planes and come back with, loot and treasure, and occasionally they do odd jobs for powerful people. There's a very powerful network of guilds within Dis that are good for finding work. And you've been at it for a century, okay? So you've got a good handle on kind of how things work, all right?
Okay.
So tell me a little bit about your companion before we get started.
All right, so getting absorbed into Dis as he was, it kind of had some adverse effects on him anatomically.
This is the companion, right?
Yeah, this is the companion. Ramshackle's fine, aside from the fact that he's been alive for 100 more years now. But his buddy, who no one remembers what his real name is, everyone calls him Scabs.
Okay.
It's kind of an unfortunate thing. When he came into Dis, his flesh, well, he didn't have much flesh from where he was coming from, so it rapidly regrew, turned orange color, and then he spontaneously has mutations that happen to him. He can sometimes control them, but sometimes they just happen.
Okay, I'm into this, yeah.
Yeah, so he's called Scabs because every time he has these freaky mutations, like, his skin doesn't heal quite, as quick as you may hope, and he gets scabs, and he gets...
Okay, good, yeah.
He gets kind of itchy. So, yeah. But he's damn good to have around because, he can pull off so many things. And he knows people here. Like, I know people here, but I think he may have known people here from before.
Okay. All right. So maybe Scabs has some secrets. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was, straight off the bat, like, day one, he's like, oh, I know what's going on here. He's kind of scratching himself and things, but he's like, but I know how, we can make a living in this place. And that was really good because, Ramshackle figured out that, like, he was hungry again. And if he didn't eat, like, he would feel weak. So
right. Yes, suddenly your biological, physiological demands, like, were back, right? In a way that you hadn't experienced for a long time.
Yeah, they all kicked back on. I won't describe, like, the horrific process of, like, coming back to life, but it was pretty gruesome, unless you're really interested in hearing that.
Maybe bonus AP content.
Yeah,
in the future. Okay, well, so I gave you 5 points to spend on your companion. So how have you assigned them, just so listeners know kind of what you're working with here?
Yeah, so Scabs has Loyalty 1, Burglar 1, so he can help me with thief stuff, Minstrel 2, so that he can help me with the people here
Social
in Dis.
Situations, yeah.
Yeah, and then Priest 1.
Oh, you gotta have some healing, right? Even if it's bad healing.
Yeah. However we can pull it off. And I'm kind of scared to think about how Scabs might go about trying to heal me, but it probably works great.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So I mentioned previously that the city of Dis occasionally, like, what are referred to as its beaches, which are kind of like its just sort of outer boundaries, right? They occasionally, like, bust into and breach into other planes, okay? And what's currently happening, that someone like you being, you and Scabs being longtime denizens of the city, Dis has managed to breach into a subplane called the Hell of Vaults, or the Burning Vaults, or the Hell Vaults. The idea being that these are little subplanes where demigods, deities, demons, very powerful creatures and beings and entities, they would keep their prized belongings in these burning vaults, these hell vaults, okay? And so every freebooter in Dis is aware of these things, being a possibility in the city, right? And trying to find them. Some people have received explicit jobs to, like, go find one of these vaults and, and break into them and get whatever treasures lie therein. what's your thinking on it? Like, are you and Scabs just going to try to find one of these things maybe and just see what you can get? Or are you being hired by someone?
Yeah, there's like a order from up top. Like, I don't know how high this thing goes, but it's from like the tippy top. Someone who's in power wants this thing out of one of these hell vaults. From the sounds of it, it's some kind of weapon.
Okay. In the city of Dis, it's ruled by an entity who calls herself the Brave Sultana. And I'm not going to get into the history of the Brave Sultana right now, but she probably has like a number of like advisors and viziers beneath her, right? And so perhaps it's one of these characters that has hired you?
It's kind of like real cloak and dagger about it. Like, I think they hire a lot of people for it, and they don't want anyone to know like who they are.
Oh, so you don't know who you're working for?
Not directly, no. They also aren't like real specific about like what it is. Like, they don't want us to know what we're stealing, because then we might want it for ourselves, I guess. Okay, but yeah. It's real shady, and it's like, how are you supposed to take a job like this? But it's Dis, and this is how jobs go around here.
Well, so just to give some color to the world, what is the in Dis the very like normal mundane way of delivering such messages, but perhaps we would think is really fantastical and amazing? Like, how are these messages delivered to you? How do you know?
It's really kind of disturbing. Like, you wake up and it's like tattooed on your arm.
Oh, nice. Good, yeah.
Depending on who put it there, it might fade away in like a few minutes or a few hours. But if it's like a big deal and it's like a higher up that you owe, it'll just stick around there for forever until you do it.
Nice. Okay, so I guess my question is, let's fast forward a little bit. What I think the first order of business is finding the specific vault that you're supposed to find. Okay, so as I mentioned, like the great metropolis of Dis, it sort of like just weaves its way and winds its way into these planes of existence. So sometimes you might just turn a corner and you're suddenly face to face, or you've suddenly stepped into some sort of like plane of shadow or something, or there's like a big like column of fire, or something like that. Like it's just kind of the way the city works. I'd be curious to find out, like, how do you go about like locating the vault?
Yeah, so the people who are in my profession, we oftentimes like have just like rope climbing gear that will like tack on behind us to places that we know is safe. And even when we're just like traveling through the city, just on a normal day, like we'll still keep a rope like stringing behind us.
Oh, nice. Good,
just in case we turn a corner like that. So you see these people walking around the city with these ropes, you know what's up. They're looking for places, and they're trying to explore.
Is there also a danger there? Because that means anybody who might, be interested in your business, like they know what you're up to, like they know that you might be freebooting right now, or what?
Yeah, like that's always a risk. It's always a risk that they'll slit the cord if you're like in a plane that you won't be able to get back without climbing out of. But it's usually like that's like a high crime in the city.
Yeah, that sounds great. So, okay, so here's what we're gonna do. Let's do a little on-the-fly custom move for finding the vault, okay?
All right.
This is going to be, which stat do you think would make sense based off how you've described it? Like intelligence, I guess? Like you just kind of are looking around and you kind of know the city, so int is kind of the angle, or is it more of a wisdom thing, like a discern realities type thing, or what?
I think it's an intelligence thing.
Okay, because I imagine there's certain like strange geometries that you have to be able to like understand, right, in order to like find the crevasse or the sort of like space, the gap in space and time, right?
Yeah, so like the way that you start about one of these, finding the place, is you go to the very middle of the city, because all the roads lead out in straight lines. But when the world twists into one of these dimensions, you can see that some of those roads aren't straight anymore. So that gives you a good idea of where you should start. And you kind of keep doing that, going from like hub to hub and like triangulating from there where there's a rift.
I love it. Roll plus int on a 10 plus, you find it and no one will interfere with you, basically. Like you've managed to cover your tracks, right? On a 7 to 9, you find it, you're good, but your exploration may have attracted unwanted attention. On a 6 minus, you find it, you may have trouble getting back. Okay.
So we got an 8.
Okay, cool. Well, so we'll pick up next session, but just kind of take us out here. Tell us like how you find the vault that you're looking for.
Yeah, so Scabs and I, we start at the middle of the city, like we normally do, and the paths to the right, they don't look quite right. They look a little non-Euclidean. So we head that way. We get to the next hub, and it's clearly bending skyward. So we head that way. As we're moving skyward, we start to see some like flickering flames, but not like the normal, not the normal yellow-green flames of Dis, but the blue flames of a Hell Vault. And so we immediately tack down there, and then jump upwards towards what we think is that Hell Vault, and we slip in.
Perfect. Now, normally, I think, you'll allow me a little retcon, I think normally these like cords or ropes that you anchor yourself to, I think maybe they have like a sort of like an astral quality that makes them like silvery if you know where to look, but otherwise kind of invisible. Does that sound good?
Yeah, sure.
What we're going to see as the camera cuts away from you, we see a new resident of the city kind of steps partially into frame, wearing a tattered black cloak, and he reaches out a hand that is mostly skeletal, but with just little bits of flesh kind of barely hanging on. And he appears to be putting his fingers in near the base, like near the ground, like level with the ground, but he kind of like pulls up gently and kind of pulls up your silver cord. And we don't see him. We don't know who this individual is, but he's on your tail.
Oh, geez, that's not good. That just leaves our last question. Who's really in control here?
Yeah, that's the Gauntlet. So you can go to our website, www.gauntlet-rpg.com. At that website, you'll find links to our G+ community. You should come join that G+ community and hang out with us. It's really fun and cool. Links to our other podcasts, as well as our various meetups.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you, David.
Thanks, listeners. That's our show.
If you're listening to this like right when we release this episode and you want to participate, go get to your computer. Get to thinking about blood. Get to thinking about bloody shit. Sorry, you can edit that out. That doesn't sound good at all.